are we born knowing what love is? Or are we taught what love is? And is love a universal language that everyone understands and everyone gets? I had a hard time answering those questions, so I decided to search the web for love. And as a noun, love is defined as a feeling of deep affection for someone. And as a verb, it's described as a feeling of deep romantic or sexual attachment to someone. And I also saw that love is such a strong feeling for someone that you understand them in a way that very few can. And I'm not here to define love from a physical, touchy feeling, everything is right in the world kind of love, or a sense. I'm here to talk about L.O.V.E, layered oppressed violent emotions, a deeper connection of how we learn to love and how we show love. Because what we consider love could open the door to a relationship filled with domestic violence. So I'm pretty sure if I were to ask you what love meant to you, those wouldn't be your definitions. To begin to individually define what love means to us, we have to look at love in phases. And in the first phase, we have to look at the foundation, which is our family and the environment that we grew up in. Because our parents are unconsciously our first experience of how we define love and how we show love. And how can we expect someone to show or even feel love without violence if they grow up in an environment where they both coexist, right? And I guess when you think about them both coexisting together, you have to understand that domestic violence and love can be sometimes hard to separate, simply because 85% of children who grow up in households where they experience domestic violence are either domestic violence abusers or they're domestic violence victims, simply because it's a learned behavior. So I believe that our love language is directly attached to our experiences and our upbringing at home. Our foundation of love is cemented in our family and the environment that we grew up in. And then the second phase is our preteen, teenage years, where we discover self-love and the idea of love from our peers. This is also an age where we understand the weight of influence. As children, we're often read fairy tale books, right? Nice fairy tales, okay. So we have the, knight in shining armor that shows up. We have the Prince Charming that shows up, and they're always saving a maiden that typically comes from a background of poverty or they're in some type of despair, right? So psychologically, that puts the idea in our minds that women always need to be saved by men. And even in elementary school, when we talk to kids about, a young boy or a young girl hitting them, we sometimes call it love taps and say that it's a sign of affection, it's showing that they like you, is flirting with you, and we're planting a seed in their minds that it's okay for somebody to abuse you if they love you or if they like you or if they even care, right? So I guess I would say preteens and teenagers face frustration, they face fear, and they face vulnerability because the environment that they're currently growing up in is what they learn to be acceptable in love. And they don't understand that love has less to do with your words and what somebody tells you, but it has more to do with their actions and the way that they treat you. And then the third phase, we talk about your exposure to social media, TV, music, and even pornography, because it gives a false sense of reality of what love is, and basically a false sense of what love is and how we love one another. And it creates a facade of unhealthy relationships and the facade of a perfect relationship on social media that sometimes has unrealistic expectations. And in reality TV, we also see the verbal abuse, we see sometimes even physical abuse of how people handle conflict in relationships. And without a clear understanding of healthy versus unhealthy behavior in relationships or early signs of abuse, the cycle of domestic violence is going to continue. And we will continue to pass it down to future generations. I believe that in order for us to break the cycle of domestic violence, we have to take a different approach. We can no longer be reactive to domestic violence in our country, as women and men are losing their lives every day at the hands of somebody who they believe love them and who they trust. Which could be pretty scary, right? Within that third phase, obviously we understand social media can play a big part in the way that we shape love and the way that we surround ourselves with love. And that becomes our example. And we have to understand that we have to teach our kids basically in a better way. And with that cycle, in order to break that cycle of domestic violence, I believe that the solution is proactive education. And in my organization, M.A.D USA, we teach proactive education as early as K-4 up to 12th grade. And we also teach in college as well. So in elementary school, we teach young kids about bullying and power and control, which are the same behaviors that you see displayed in adult relationships that turn into domestic violence. And teenagers from middle school up until high school, we teach them about teen dating and domestic violence. By educating them on how to define or redefine what love is based off of what we teach as healthy versus unhealthy relationships, going back to breaking that cycle of learned behavior. And the earlier that we're able to teach our kids about healthy relationships, the stronger chance they have of combating domestic violence and breaking the cycle of domestic violence. We also teach military, first responders, law enforcement, and other professional adults about domestic violence to show them the signs and obviously break the cycle all the way around. And you may wonder, as a male, why am I standing in front of you speaking about domestic violence, which is typically viewed as a woman's issue, right? Well, on September 30th, 2006, domestic violence literally took my world away. My mom and my 4 siblings were murdered by my mother's husband in North Charleston, South Carolina. And that took me on a 7-year journey of rediscovering myself, my purpose, my why, and I moved back home to Charleston and attended church, and the first sermon that I heard was about asking the right questions. Not asking for why, but asking for guidance. And as a result, I held an event in honor of my mom and my 4 siblings to bring awareness to domestic violence. Because I didn't want their death to be in vain. I wanted their story to be a war cry to save lives, for change. And I didn't want them to be remembered by the tragedy, but I wanted them to be remembered by the lives that were saved by breaking the cycle of domestic violence, one student at a time. And in our work at M.A.D, we do a lot of proactive education. We do obviously reactive work as well, but I feel like the proactive piece is the key to breaking the cycle of domestic violence. And the birth of M.A.D came from just basically looking at myself as a male and looking at the fact that we are absent in the culture of domestic violence. We don't accept our roles. We don't go out and advocate for it. It's usually women. But we play a big role in it. And yes, men are abused, but we have to first join the conversation and accept our responsibility and our role in it. And what I would like you to take away from today is that, one, domestic violence is not a private issue. It's a community problem, and we have to treat it as such. So domestic violence is everybody's business, because it might be somebody else's daughter today, but it might be your daughter tomorrow. Secondly, we have to be a good example of what love is. Because everyone thinks that love is just something that everybody understands. They know what a healthy relationship is, but it's not. We are literally taught what love is. So we have to be an example for our children of what healthy love looks like, because they're always watching us. So how we handle anger, how we handle conflict is exactly the way that they're going to handle it when they get older. And the third thing is to educate our kids on healthy relationships. In 5th grade, we teach kids about sex ed. High school, we get them to carry around babies. And we teach them the most complicated things of relationships. But we leave out the most important part. What is healthy? What is healthy behavior? How am I supposed to be treated? What is my value? That's what we have to start teaching. And we have to teach our kids that love is not layered, oppressed, violent emotions. Thank you.